David Cobb covers college basketball and college football for CBSSports.com. And he joins us now here on Ruscin Zach on the Williams Tractor Hotline. David, thank you for the time today. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, doing all right. How you guys doing?
We're doing good. We appreciate it. Of course, we're having you on, and if the folks aren't aware, there's a piece that David wrote on CBSSports.com about Eric Musselman and the overhaul that the Razorback basketball roster is undergoing right now. And there's a couple of mentions there about this formula. Is this like the formula to Coca-Cola or the 11 herbs and spices? Is this like does Musselman have kind of a he's not willing to give away all his secrets on that? Just kind of tell us about that little part of that conversation.
Yeah, I was pretty amazed at the level of detail. I mean, I guess I shouldn't have been. I mean, a successful major college basketball coach who's been coaching for over 30 years, has been a head coach of 2 NBA teams, has a pedigree in the profession. But it was just interesting, I guess, to hear him talk about how they sort of deduce whether or not a transfer is going to be productive in their program. And so they had a formula, like you say, at Nevada that was pretty much nailed. So depending on what tier of play or what conference a player was coming from, they could pretty well predict going into the season how productive he was going to be, what his percentages would be, how the stats like rebounding would transfer and translate to that level. And they're still refining it at Arkansas. So that's why I think this upcoming Arkansas team is going to be really, really interesting, because there's so many transfers, and that formula that they had in Nevada is being tweaked. And so I think he's interested to see how closely they've got some of these projections nailed on some of these guys.
I find it interesting that when, a lot of coaches will go into a new job and they're basically just trying to replicate what they had. He saw that what he was doing at Nevada had to be tweaked, and they had to come up with a new formula and a new system. How commonplace is that? And, I mean, this guy is so detail-oriented and so interested in the analytics part of it. Is this sort of where basketball is heading as we move further into the 21st century?
Yeah, he was talking to me about how just intense the competition has gotten on the transfer market. And so, I mean, regardless of where you are in the pecking order of college basketball, you've got to have a pulse on the recruiting as well. And so I think it just really worked out in Arkansas's favor that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but one of the best in-state classes, in recent memory in Arkansas in 2020 for them to pick from. And so, I mean, I think that's going to be part of what they're trying to do moving forward is a blend or a mix, because the competition for the transfers is just, especially when you think about the fact that in all likelihood in the future there won't be the requirement that players sit out. I mean, everybody's going to be in the transfer game, and it may not be that sort of niche thing like it was for him at Nevada. It's going to be a mainstream thing in a normal way for coaches to rebuild their rosters, and so he's going to have to continue, probably, I would say, tweaking and adjusting the system as he gets it off the ground here. But his track record, I think, is one that suggests he can do it.
We're talking with David Cobb from CBSSports.com with us here on Ruscin Zach. Being here and most fans really only being interested in what's going on here, we see this guy come in here, and he's a totally different approach, detail-oriented. And I'm curious, is this unique, or is this how the rest of the sport at a high level operates, and we're just getting to see it in the state of Arkansas for the first time in a long time?
I just think the NBA experience makes him different. I mean, there really aren't a ton of, hardly any former NBA head coaches who are now college coaches. And Eric Musselman was a head coach of 2 NBA franchises. And so, it's been close to a decade now. He was, or maybe even over a decade since he was in the NBA. He's been in the G League and stuff, I know. But, there is an absolute prerequisite for that level of detail in the NBA. I covered the Grizzlies before I joined CBS Sports, and the level of attention to analytics, to the details, is just off the charts. Eric credited his father with kind of being on the front end of that. He credited QB Brown, a coach that he worked with in Memphis, for helping sort of show him the way in terms of analytics. And so, I think it's absolutely going to work to his favor that he's incorporating those things in the college game. It already has worked to his favor at Nevada. And so, I think that what Muss is doing, I wouldn't be at all surprised if after a year or two of success at Arkansas, if he starts to grow a college coaching tree where some of these assistants who are working for him now get opportunities to be head coaches. And then maybe 10, 15 years down the line, as Muss's career is wrapping up, I could see him having a couple of guys who have worked for him who have also gone on to be head coaches at the college level.
If this continues, where he is constantly bringing guys in and turning the roster over, when they start or when they tip off next November or whenever they wind up tipping off, I mean, he could have one or two guys who've worn a jersey in a game. Kentucky gets kind of the, they were kind of the standard bearer for turning a roster over every year. Is this sort of the new wave? Is this how we're going to do it? It might not always be freshmen, but you're going to see this constant turnover.
I love the Kentucky comparison because if you think about nationally over the next several months leading into the new college basketball season, everyone's going to talk about Kentucky and the amount of roster turnover that they have. But the fact is, right now, they're on track to have 8 new players playing. Now, they could get waivers on a couple of transfers and be up to 10, but they'd be on par with Arkansas in terms of the number of new players. But I don't think that Kentucky's situation is enviable. I think that Arkansas could very well have a better season than Kentucky due to the fact that some of these guys who are coming in, looking at Justin Smith, looking at Vance Jackson, Jalen Tate, all grad transfers, and then a couple of the sit-out guys, too, who sat out last season, have college experience already. And then, of course, if you get Isaiah Joe back, then that changes things as well. So Arkansas's got a lot more experience than Kentucky does, and they've got a comparable, honestly, a comparable freshman class to Kentucky. So I think that Kentucky is going to be way too overly reliant on freshmen, and I think that could be a Kentucky team that loses 11 or 12 games and gets into the NCAA tournament as an 8 or a 9 seed. Honestly, I think if I had to project the SEC right now, I might put Arkansas ahead of Kentucky.
Wow. We're talking with David Cobb from CBS Sports here on Ruscin and Zach. So let's kind of extrapolate that a little further. What kind of ceiling are we looking at here? Arkansas hasn't been to a Sweet 16 since 1996. And many people are optimistic that this is the guy that's going to break through and finally put Arkansas in the second weekend of the tournament again.
Yeah, I think I'd be lying if I said that Isaiah Joe's decision doesn't have some bearing on my, sort of my calibration on this team. I think if he comes back, Sweet 16. I think that's a realistic goal. Now, the one thing that I kind of don't love about college basketball, obviously the tournament is just awesome, one of the best events in sports. But it's a little frustrating sometimes when a program or a coach or a group of players, I think, are judged entirely based on what happens in March. So I guess I would look at it more from a standpoint of win total. And this was a 20-win team last year, 20-12 if I'm not mistaken. And I think they're probably a 23 or 24-win team in the 2020-21 season. And maybe even a couple games higher than that if Joe comes back.
There's a ton of talent on this team. In reading your article, you list the 4 freshmen and then all the transfers, and Desi Sills comes back, Ethan Henderson's still on the team. His biggest issue right now is minute management. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's going to be a new challenge, I think, for Eric. Nevada, he was explaining it to me, and it makes sense. When you only have 13 scholarships, and you got 4 transfers sitting out every year, which he says he did at Nevada, 4 transfers sitting out every year, your rotation manages itself because you've only got 9 scholarship players that are eligible to be out there. And that was sort of the case for Arkansas last year with 3 transfers sitting out and then, some injury problems. And so the rotation, to a certain degree, managed itself. The competition is going to be, I think, pretty intense. I'm looking up and down this roster, looking at recruiting rankings and how productive guys were in their previous colleges and some of the returning guys. And I've got no idea how to make a depth chart for Arkansas right now. I'm sure Eric knows how to do one, at least to a certain degree at this point. But I mean, a lot of that will be hashed out in the coming months. But I mean, I think that's ultimately what you want. Is an internal competition where there's no real sense of entitlement for guys. I mean, obviously, if Isaiah Joe comes back, he's in that starting lineup and he's getting his shots. But after that, I mean, honestly, a lot of guys with talent who are going to be jockeying for minutes and for roles.
David Cobb is our guest, sports writer, CBSSports.com. Got the piece on Eric Musselman up right now on CBSSports.com that you can check out. He is joining us here on Ruscin and Zach. And another thing that I've lived here my entire life, I've never seen anybody so willing to market the program like Musselman. He'll do any show, any interview. I think he was just on your colleague John Rothstein's podcast. He is just, I don't know how he gets all the energy between all of the putting everything together for the basketball team and then to appear to talk into any microphone that'll have him about what he's got going on here at Arkansas. There's never been anyone here, David, that we've seen that's been that willing to market Arkansas basketball before. I
know, right? And you wouldn't necessarily expect that from a guy with an NBA background because that's all taken care of in the NBA. You don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about that. But I mean, kudos to him for realizing the power that he has as a college coach. I remember that video, I think it was shortly after the pandemic started, where he's like in the gym blowing the whistle and like barking out orders to nobody.
Right.
And I mean, it was like pretty funny, I appreciate stuff like that. He called me. I had reached out to the school and been like, hey, I want to talk to Eric Musselman. A couple days ago, I didn't hear anything, and I just get a call out of the blue. It was him on a cell number. I didn't answer the first time because I thought it was somebody trying to sell me health insurance. And I was like, all right, well, that's refreshing. Like, I just get the call. Don't even have to really go through any middlemen. That's kind of rare in today's environment. So, I give him an A+ from my vantage point in that regard. Obviously, I haven't covered him like as a beat writer necessarily, but he seems to really get it, I guess, in terms of understanding what it takes to be successful in the college game outside of just the X's and O's, just the recruiting. And for a guy with a professional background, that's not a given. So I give him props for that.
When I was reading your article, the thought just occurred to me. I mean, the guy won 20 games last year in his first year with a roster that, quite honestly, was not up to par. He wins 20 games, and he's willing to blow it up and start over again with guys that he wants. How rare is that in college basketball? I can't think of a coach in any sport who said, you know what, bleep it. We won 20 games, so let's start over again.
Yeah, I do think that's pretty rare. There was already going to be some attrition on that roster anyway, like just because there were some seniors, I guess. And I mean, Mason. I don't think anybody could have foreseen Mason Jones having the season that he did. I think Mason Jones probably good at it because I know he was good before last season, and he put the work in, and so he probably knew that he was ready to take a big step forward. But I just wouldn't have thought necessarily that he would be a guy who could legitimately have professional aspirations after last season. But he really played well. So I think in a sense, like they just sort of ended up with more spots than maybe they expected, and so. I mean, the one guy that I'm really excited about is Connor Vanover because when you just look at how small Arkansas had to play a lot of times last season, I mean, to have a 7'3" guy that you can now trot out there who, oh, by the way, shoots 3-pointers and, oh, by the way, is from Arkansas, that's going to be exciting, I think, to see how they sort of utilize him. Maybe like a Brooke Lopez is kind of what Musselman suggested. So, the thing is, I think they just wanted to have options for how to play because Musselman did a great job of making the small ball thing work for the first 3 quarters of last season. But, I mean, eventually caught up with them. They just didn't have the depth. They didn't have the size. And now they're going to have options, and they're going to have depth, and they're going to be able to go small or they're going to be able to go big. And, I mean, it's going to be a challenge in that sense of just sort of honing in on how to do it. But a guy with his track record will be able to figure it out. And so they may not be, clicking on all cylinders out of the gate. But I think this is a team that, finishes in the upper tier of the SEC, no doubt.
David Cobb, his piece on Eric Musselman, rapidly rebuilding the Razorback roster, up now on CBSSports.com. David, we appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, guys.
All right, David and all our guests, join us here on the Williams Tractor Hotline on Ruscin and Zach.